Ansel. Last night, I couldn't sleep. I initially fell asleep, but then had the impression of something shoving me awake. I opened my eyes to see a small gargoyle staring back at me. "Why?" I mumbled. He peered at me from atop my nightstand. I lay there, unhappily drifting into consciousness, enough to recall that this was not the first time that night I'd been suddenly awoken. The first time, I'd been pleasantly reliving a sun-soaked childhood memory of wandering along a clear, murmuring creek carrying a Dixie cup. I stopped at the bank and peered in to look for pollywogs when something unseen abruptly pushed me aside, back, and away from the water, and the startled fall brought me back to my adult bedroom. "Was that you too?" I asked him blearily. The stone pig continued looking back at me, mutely peering out from his tiny, broad-set eyes, his mouth curiously drawn back, frozen in understated wonder, beneath his gracefully turned-up nose. His dainty front hooves curled under their knobby joints in a posture that no doubt originally braced him against his building's edge, but now, rather comically, just suggested a prelude to a piggy gallop. Was that necessary? After a few moments' silence, I attempted to answer my own question. Sitting up and shaking off the remaining layers of haze, I recalled aloud. "I read somewhere that in medieval lore you guys worked as guardians. You were originally designer rainspouts, protecting buildings' walls and foundations from water erosion, right? And then you started protecting people as well. Is that what's going on here?" Pig looked dutiful. "Well, thank you. I'm not sure what warrants your assignment, but I appreciate the thought. Who knows, maybe one day I'll need it." Pig's fleeting, emphatic look escaped me at the time. "Take that dream I was in earlier tonight. That was an amalgam of one of my favorite summer childhood memories." Pig knew. He'd been trailing me through the night for some time, long enough to have become familiar with my reoccurring dreams and their common themes. He knew that, for me, kangaroos represent sickness, worms, fear, and summer creeks and beaches, joy. He also knew that water corrodes and destroys, and must be kept away from one's charge at all times. "Listen, what's your name?" The stone mouth opened. "Ansel." "Ansel, I have a lot to do tomorrow. If I'm able to drift off back to sleep, I don't suppose you'd refrain from waking me up a third time?" Ansel looked resolute in his line of duty. He was about to promise nothing. "Okay, how about this? I'll try to go back to sleep, and you come directly with me into my dream this time, from the onset as opposed to sleuthing behind or whatever you do. Then, as soon as you think you see anything dangerous coming on, you can do whatever you can do to alter the circumstances beforehand, rather than just pushing me out of the way at the last minute. Could that work?" Ansel looked thoughtful, his simplistic gray eye holes alone animated above the childish curvature of his granite nose and mouth. And so, with no apparent objection, I laid back down to reclaim sleep. When I was at last poised to dream, I somehow remembered that I needed to take Ansel with me, so I strapped him onto me in a little front pouch. Then I looked far down over my right shoulder and watched a white bundle branch down my back, then bloom into a feathery fan. From my left shoulder, its duplicate. And as always around this time of night, I stretched my wings and alighted through the walls and out into the nebulous interway between dreams. Along the gulf, we passed a shadowland of muted scenes and amorphous impressions. Although in a shrouded place, I was somehow aware that when we'd reached our destination. A light breaching the dim passageway drew me out toward a warm, gingery sunrise over a tacit bay. Initially, Ansel was frightened, I think sympathetically for me, when he took in the full water view. I could feel his front legs clutch fearfully into the inner panel of the front pack, digging into my breastbone. Then, as I deliberately flew slow circles above the gilt-tumbling surface, his tension subsided. And I descended upon a small island with an impressive, bustling waterside old town, its castle walls studded with gargoyles. "Oh, this is lovely. Great choice, Ansel," I exclaimed from my bird's eye view. And I decided to fly over and land next to the other gargoyles because I was curious to see how Ansel would enjoy interacting with some of his peers. "I have to say that not all gargoyles are the cutest things. The majority of them defied anatomical category and would probably be classified as chimera, part goat, part cat, maybe part lizard? Hard to tell. More recognizable and a little easier on the eyes were the griffin and the frogs. Ansel was the only pig, and, as I appreciated for the first time, a comparatively good-looking gargoyle. Once we landed, we watched several of the near fixtures detach themselves from their water spouts and make their way over to us, with the jerking, unnatural shuffling in which stone transports itself. Slowly, 2 frogs, the griffin, and one, something else, presented themselves. "Cathedral," said the griffin to the pig. "Yes, how'd you know?" Ansel replied. "You just look the type." "So I've been told." "Scottish?" "English." "Ah. So, what's your average here?" "Oh, about 1.5 right now. But we're heading into the wet season, so we should start seeing about 3 inches a month." "Are these lead gutters?" "Yeah." "Soldered seams, minimal leakage." "Oh, yeah, those hold up." And so the 5 gargoyles proceeded to talk shop, as I'd hoped to witness, but which I confess I'd imagined to find a little more colorful and less hydraulic. You know, eyewitness accounts of castle pageants and pirates and ship rescues and political coups. But instead, all their combined centuries of history seemed to amount to, "Yeah, we had a stone culvert system for runoff with some gradual sloping." "Oh." Ansel seemed to be enjoying himself, but as I struggled to maintain interested attention, I decided to stroll the walls and take in the architecture. Admiring the intermittent sea view and the sun's warmth as I passed the battlements, one particular gap revealed another gargoyle positioned at the wall's bend. Interested to meet another of Ansel's peers, I made my way over. "Hello." I approached. The head turned, and I was met with a crazed rooster's stare. Below it threatened 2 dragons' wings, and below them arched a snake's tail. "Wow. Are you a chimera too?" He didn't answer, but offense seemed to intensify his look even more. "It's okay. I'll just look it up." I whipped out my phone and typed in his distinct features. Let's see. Rooster, dragon, snake. "Oh, it looks like you're a basilisk." The offended edge retracted, leaving only his baseline intensity. "And it tells a little about you. Let's see. Petrifying gaze. Yeah. He looked satisfied. Can cause death by just looking at you. Well, maybe you're more forgiving than other basilisks." He looked insecure. Hatch from the egg of a rooster?" His insecurity assumed a shade of confusion. "And what else?" I continued, hoping to find something less embarrassing. And without reading ahead, "Blame for the spread of syphilis in 15th century Europe." Well, that's probably more information than I need. Basilisk seemed grateful to be able to blend in with the gray wall. Perhaps he's not all to blame for his inhospitality. "Looks like you've been scapegoated a bit." He grimaced into the ocean. "Well, they're talking gutters over there on the far side of the wall, if you'd like to join in." I can't be sure, but I think he rolled his eyes. But I think in response to my invitation, his expression did lose its edge. He even glanced farewell. Meanwhile, "Yeah, we always had stone cisterns. Now, when I hear about clay, I go, okay." I approached the little stone circle and waved hello. They ceased their discussion and greeted me, each courteous after his own way. The frogs implied hello with their eternally affable popping eyes and upturned rubbery mouths. The griffin's eagle eyes acknowledged me cordially above his lion's bust. And the chimera's alien, goaty voice reverberated, something unintelligible, from deep within its scrambled form. Ansel likewise said hello. "Hey, I just met another one over there on the far west side of the wall." The 2 frogs gave each other looks. The chimera looked doubtfully toward the said direction, his snake-headed tail following the turn of his horns while swaying back and forth between them. "Did I say something wrong?" I asked rhetorically. You mean the basilisk? Asked Frog 1. Yes, he seemed a little moody, but I invited him over anyway, just in case. Is that okay? Sure, croaked Frog 2, but you do know that he was created by the satanic crossbreeding of poisonous toads and roosters. Oh, no, I didn't. And that he can kill plants and shatter stones with his noxious breath, informed Frog 1, affirmed by the chimera's piping dissonance. I really didn't notice, but then I was standing upwind from him and a few feet away. Venom so strong it poisons a well for centuries after he takes just one drink, warned Griffin, soberly. Do you really believe all that? I asked. No, not really, Griffin confessed, but it's just what we all grew up hearing. And you have to admit that he isn't too approachable. And did you see any plants growing around him? Well, I guess not, I confessed. Then, following my train of curiosity, asked, So, do you all have a dual protective calling like Ansel does? You know, assigned to both buildings and people? Yes, they all answered in succession, except the chimera, who made a noise like a bagpipe. Ansel, seeing the next question rendering across my face, added, Even basilisk. Really? I said, surprised and curious. Well, clarified Griffin, he's more a protector of sacred places, but that does include the people inside. And the rest of us, yes, a dual calling, to protect buildings and people. I glanced around at the menagerie of 5 little stone gargoyles before me, each standing a bit more upright and dignified than a moment ago, like a company of newly unmasked superheroes, each pledged to protect their resident building by day, and by night, people they knew were marked for destruction by water. I was dying to visit the beach. I'd had my eye on it ever since Ansel and I flew in. However, I was aware that this could cause some anxiety in my well-intentioned friends, so I tried to think of a good excuse to get away again. I couldn't, so instead I blurted out, Excuse me, I need to talk to Basilisk about something. As I walked away, Frog 1 and Chimera looked concerned. Do you think you put a hex on her? She looks a little tired, asked Frog 1. Chimera wheezed concurrently. Can he do that? Asked Frog 2. Remember a couple of weeks ago, that tourist from Oregon with the rash? Recounted Frog 1. I thought that was food allergies, remarked Griffin. That's what they're always calling it nowadays, but I think we all still know a hex when we see one. I heard the discussion fade into the background as I headed off toward Basilisk on my ostensible errand. I could feel pairs of sympathetic stone eyes occasionally glancing after me. I found Basilisk scowling at a seagull that had landed next to him. The seagull strutted and posed, unconcerned, then squawked loudly. Basilisk looked at him like he wished he could wield a hex. But he couldn't. I approached. Why do you stay here? I asked, a little surprised at my own forwardness. I mean, Griffin said that your natural calling is to protect sacred places, so why stay on a touristy castle that you don't seem to enjoy much? Now I know that there are any number of reasons why people continue in ruts when any casual onlooker might see glaring reasons and even means to leave. We each have our own personal breaking point, and there are those for whom that breaking point has an extremely long lead. I suspect Basilisk to be one of them. The bird sat on his head, and he closed his eyes in disgust. I'm sorry, maybe I'm being too nosy, but I just thought I'd mention it while I'm here. You know, the pig works a cathedral by day. You might ask him about it. Basilisk looked askance at me from under the indignity of the bird. I got the feeling he didn't like tourists much either, so I decided to leave it at that and head for the beach. I first looked back toward the 5 gargoyles in the distance, immersed in whatever new tangent they were on. Then I bid Basilisk goodbye and ducked behind the wall, covertly hastening down the nearest staircase toward the water. I never saw Basilisk watching me tentatively from above. Meanwhile, Ansel became increasingly aware that I'd been gone for some time, yet he could see that I wasn't with Basilisk. Wondering where I could have gone, he began to tune out the debate about whether single-headed chimera could still breathe fire, and had even lost interest as their own goat-headed resident was about to give a demonstration. No longer unable to avoid images of his charge being dashed about in the ocean's waves, Ansel abruptly excused himself. The others stopped and looked at him. Goat-headed chimera paused mid-flame. Ansel then felt obligated to explain his alarm. As I hustled across the beach, I felt a small granite hoof grab my right hand. I turned and was persuaded instead to fly home. We sailed back through the hazy corridor, rushing past staticky vignettes, now resolving with the dawn's illumination, until we reached my room. I put in a word about Basilisk joining him at his cathedral. Then, as I said goodbye, my wings retracted into seamless, invisible pockets above my shoulder blades. I tumbled down softly into bed, and a moment later opened my eyes. 6 o'clock. My hands went about my young day, while my mind lingered in the night's dream. Fresh memories of the Golden Island distracted me from the brooding storm and darkening skies outside my window. A few hours hastened by, the day's cooking done and put away. I was ready to run some errands, so I gathered my purse and keys and got in my car. Disregarding the oncoming rain, I was determined to keep to my daily schedule and was unaware how much water would come and how much I would need him.